Darlene Morgan here. As an estate planning lawyer, I see a lot of common mistakes that people make time and again, either when they are trying to do it themselves with online forms or other legal software, or perhaps are working with an inexperienced attorney or an attorney that is sort of the jack of all trades and they really don't specialize in estate planning. So I thought it would be helpful just to talk about the 10 common estate planning mistakes. Because without professional guidance, people can make more mistakes that can end up costing them more in the long run than the money that they might save in the short run by doing it themselves. So a qualified lawyer really is here to help you avoid making these kinds of mistakes. And so I thought I'd share some of the top 10 common estate planning mistakes. Number one that I see is the failure to leave any written documentation about what your assets actually are. In our firm, we have a way of doing that by listing everything out, an asset inventory or on an Excel spreadsheet. So it's easy to do, but I do find that most of the time this isn't done. And the result is that if something unexpected happened, your beneficiaries or your trustee, they might not, it just takes them a lot longer to try to figure it out, to decide, to figure out what your assets are, to go through all your papers, to collect that information. And sometimes they miss things. And there is in California, the unclaimed property division has billions of dollars in it because of this very reason, where assets go untouched, people don't know about them, and they end up reverting to the state. So that's common mistake number one, is not having written documentation of what your assets are. And this would also include online accounts or online passwords or digital assets. Second common mistake is failure to let family members know where they can find your estate planning documents. I can't tell you how many times we've gotten phone calls from people, and they're kind of searching around because they can't find the documents and they're not sure where they're supposed to look, and maybe they suspect there's a safety deposit box, but they don't know where that is either. So that would be a common mistake, is not letting your family members know where they would be able to find your estate planning documents. Number three, what I see a lot of times is the failure to name a guardian for your minor children at all, or more commonly, failure to name temporary guardians or short-term guardians. So if your guardians live in another state, then your kids could be at risk of going into Child Protective Services if there's not an immediate or, like I said, or short-term guardian named to be able to step in until those long-term guardians are able to arrive here in the state. So that's a pretty common mistake. Another common mistake is failure to name recipients for your personal possessions. So sometimes even when people have their estate plan in place, they have not taken the time to say where some of their precious jewelry or heirlooms who those would go to. And that can be a really common area that people fight over. Family members who, the family silver or special meaningful art or other treasures of the family, and the kids sometimes will fight over those things if they don't know exactly who you wanted to receive those. Another common mistake that I see is failure to name beneficiaries on retirement accounts. So sometimes what I see is it may say something like your estate. Sometimes there'll be outdated beneficiaries listed on those forms. Sometimes there's nobody named, or somebody who's already passed away is named. So that is also a common mistake I see, is not naming beneficiaries on retirement or other financial accounts. Number 6, failure to name secondary beneficiaries. So similar, we need to have our primary, and then it's always good to have contingent beneficiaries listed as well. So another common mistake is a failure to name alternatives to the trustees or the executors. So I always like for us to name who the primary or who your first choice is, but then to also have backups. If something happened to your first choice or they couldn't do the job, who is going to be your second choice or your backup? Another common mistake I see all the time is the failure to fund or properly title your assets. Sometimes an attorney, if you do it yourself, you probably don't even know how to title your assets correctly. A lot of times, even working with a law firm, they don't give you any guidance on how you're supposed to title your assets either. So it is very important. Just having a trust in place or just having a will in place isn't necessarily the end of the road. Every asset needs to be titled correctly, not just once, but over the course of your lifetime. Every asset needs to be titled correctly, because if it's not, then there could be a probate or a conservatorship, which is what we don't want to happen. So that's pretty common. Another common mistake is failure to update your estate plan as either life changes or as your assets change. And finally, probably the biggest mistake is the failure to create any kind of an estate plan. So a lot of times this is just not something that people like to think about. They don't like to plan for it. So they put it off and they put it off. And sometimes they put it off too late, and they never are able to. And they leave their family with a huge mess, which is something that they didn't mean to do. But that, then the court has to get involved. And the court system, there's a lot of, it's much more difficult, much more time consuming, much more expensive than just having taken care of this on the front end while you can. So if you want to learn more about how to avoid common estate planning failures or mistakes, please contact our firm. We'd be happy to work with you to make sure that we get a solid plan in place that is going to work when your family needs it the most.